It doesn't matter how many times I see that movie, it just makes me really happy. And it was really made by grassroots activists around the world who send in their videos after their risings. And when people ask me, what does dancing do? I go, are you kidding? Is that clear? But I want to say how excited I am to be here today and thrilled to be speaking after Princess Esmeralda. That was a beautiful speech and really moving. And here to be included with my sister as well. And I just want to begin by saying that we've just come on the heels of 1 billion rising this year, and for all the activists here who participated, thank you. It's been another third amazing year, bigger than even the last 2 years, and much more deeper, more powerful, more impacting, and effective. And I just have witnessed this year, and I think we've all witnessed so much bravery, creativity, effectiveness, solidarity of women and men, rising with their hearts and beings, forging new cultural paths, deconstructing patriarchy, and bringing about justice, education, advocacy, and a whole new body energy that is rising around the world. I was thinking about the topic for today, and I realized that I have to go back to vaginas, because actually everything began with vaginas. And I had no idea then what saying the word would do, but with saying the word, with curiosity about women's experiences, with interviewing and talking to women, with turning the conversations into fictional, theatrical pieces and monologues, which were then performed by me and after by groups of diverse women for women, this whole experience began to create and develop a network of women who had an experience which provoked them to share their own stories and to get active on the issue of ending violence against women and girls. Then we began to see that the play could be a tool to grow a movement, that theater, creative uprising, and resistance could be a way to unlock, release, touch, and empower women in ways that other forms really couldn't accomplish. In 1998, we did our first production of the Vagina Monologues in New York to specifically focus on ending violence against women and girls, and we invited all these amazing actors, from Whoopi Goldberg to Susan Sarandon to Glenn Close, to Rosie Perez, and everybody said yes. And we thought it would be one night in a really huge theater where we raised money for local groups, and what it did was explode this movement. And I just really believe vaginas have their own life, and I have been trying to keep up with them ever since, because it just went in many beautiful directions. It really began a model of how the play could be used, and for the last 18 years, the play has been brought into thousands of communities, performed every year for free, so that all the proceeds went to local groups who were working to stop violence against women. During these years, relationships were formed, friendships were made that have lasted many, many years. And today, Karina is here, Marisa Seal is here. I mean, we've been in this movement together now 15 years working on this issue together. And those friendships have laid the ground for what happened in 1 Billion Rising. The play and the movement have brought me around the world, and it's been such an incredible life and such a privilege to be invited into various countries through the performances and activities. And I have been privileged, beyond privileged, to meet women on the front lines, grassroots activists who are doing the daily, tireless, generous, often unpaid, largely invisible work of keeping their communities alive and working for the betterment and transformation of the world. It became clear to me early on that these women were in fact the women holding up the world, weaving another story out of sight. They put their bodies and beings on the line every day, sometimes risking their lives, facing enormous odds, doing the work not for money or fame or political gain, but because they had to do this work. They were compelled by higher forces. These women and some men, we have come to call in the world Vagina Warriors. And I use warrior in a very specific sense, one whose basic responsibility is to protect and preserve life and resist all forms of violence. Vagina warriors are women and men who have been through or witnessed terrible violence, and rather than getting an AK-47 or a machete or retaliating, they actually grieve what's happened to them, they experience it, and that allows that to then become a transformation in their bodies, which impels them and compels them to commit their lives to making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Vagina warriors are everywhere. In a time of escalating and explosive violence on the planet, these warriors are fostering a new paradigm. The struggle to end violence on this planet is a battle, make no mistake about it, and I actually think it's the biggest war that's going on the planet today. when you think that 1 out of 3 women on the planet will be beaten or raped in her lifetime. 1 out of 3. And that's just women who are on the receiving end of the violence. What about the witnessing of the violence, or the hearing about the violence, or being in the proximity of the violence? We're all survivors on some level of trauma and violence in a world that is so predatory. It requires every bit of our strength and our fierceness, and it means speaking out when everyone says to be quiet. It means going the distance to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions and beginning to imagine how we could create systems that were not just and horrible incarceration prison systems which escalate the violence, but actually created systems that were about transformation of consciousness, rebuilding a new mindset, and allowing people to go through a restorative healing process. It means honoring the truth, even if it means losing family, country, and friends. And it means developing the spiritual muscle to enter and survive the grief that violence brings, and in that dangerous place of stunned unknowing, inviting in the deeper wisdom. This is the work of Vagina Warriors. So I want to focus today on 2 warriors, because I believe that stories are not only instructional but inspirational. And I believe that grassroots women's leaders and activists hold the key to the revolutionary future. And the continual marginalization of their voices, vision, and work is not accidental. Vagina Warriors threaten the existing order because they fight the neoliberal capitalist structures, systems, and policies that have proliferated a world of criminal economic inequality. At this point, 1% of the world owns half the wealth. 85 people make the same amount as 3.5 billion. Racial injustice, environmental destruction, imperialist interventions that spurn illegal wars, rapes, and pandemic rates of violence against women. As I said, 1 billion women on the planet will be violated. I want to focus on their stories today, but because I believe that grassroots women hold the key to the future. Their methods are the most creative, practical, and innovational. Their passion is undeniable. Their commitment, a radical practice, and fire, teaching all of us the amount of work and dedication that is required to bring about revolution of this particular world. So let me begin with Agnes Pariah. I'm just going to tell you a few details about her life. I love talking about Agnes so much. I just saw her in New York for our February 7th Rising in New York City. But I met Agnes about 12 years ago in the middle of the Rift Valley. I was researching my play, The Good Body, and I had heard there was a woman who was stopping the practice of female genital mutilation. So I went out to Kenya in the middle of Narok, and in a little classroom, I found this amazing woman who had a box, and inside the box was an anatomical structure of a woman's body. And she was in this classroom teaching girls and boys, women and men, what a healthy vagina looked like and what a mutilated vagina looked like. And I was like, I felt like I had stumbled into like some major acid trip, you know, and I was sitting in the room, and I was so moved by her clarity, her purpose, her creativity, and her commitment. And afterwards, I met her and I said, I'm in love with you. What can I do to support you? Because I think you're amazing. And she told me her story, that she had been cut as a girl against her will. She had lost the route to her own sexual energy and river and flow. And she had made a decision early on in her life that she was going to end the practice in her community. And I said, well, what could we do? How could we support you? And she said, well, if you really want to support me, you can get me a Jeep. Because for years, 10 years, Agnes was walking through the Rift Valley, walking on foot with her box, her anatomical structure, teaching communities of Maasai women along the way how to stop the practice. And in the time that she had walked, she had saved 1,500 girls from being cut. So she said, if you got me a Jeep, I could get around a lot faster. So we bought her a Jeep. And in that year, she reached 4,500 girls. So I said, okay, Agnes, what else do you need? And she said, well, Eve, there are now laws in Kenya that outlaw female genital mutilation. If you gave me money, I could build a house, and girls could run away, and they could be safe, and they could go to school. Because in Kenya, when a girl is cut, that is the point her education ends, and she becomes marriageable, and she no longer has autonomy. So we gave Agnes money to build a house, and I never forget arriving for the opening of the house, and she said, I think you're going to be really mad at me. And I was like, why? And she said, well, I built 2 houses with the money I gave you. And I was like, I don't think we're going to be mad. In those years that Agnes has been there, and it's amazing to watch her journey. When she started, she was exiled from her community because she's Maasai, and the Maasai are very traditional, and she was going completely up against the traditions. And I firmly believe that the only people can change in their country are the people who live in countries. I don't believe people from outside can come into people's countries to do anything. I think what we can do is support the women who know what they're doing on the ground and get them resources or whatever they ask us for, and not tell them what to do, and not create their agendas because we're giving them resources, but trust that they know how to operate and change and transform their countries. And I have watched Agnes go from being somebody who was exiled in her community and scorned to somebody who was elected deputy mayor 5 years ago, and this year ran for parliament. And she has saved thousands and thousands of girls' lives. But more importantly, she has made this a part of the Maasai community. And she has brought in the Maasai community. They are part of this upheaval and this change. And I had the pleasure a few years ago, she invited me to come because after the girls run away, Agnes keeps them for a period of time. They get educated, they learn their rights. And then she brings them back to their families for reconciliation. And in just about every single case, her families have accepted the girls back without the cut. And so this furthers the communities making the decision to stop the cut in general. And I was in a small hut when we went, and she reconciled this beautiful girl with her father. And it was one of the most emotional things I've ever seen because the girl had run away. She was terrified her father would never speak to her again. There was a lot of conflict because she had refused to be cut. And she walked into the house of her father, and her sisters were there, and everyone was just weeping and so happy she had returned after a year. And she spoke to her father, and she was so confident, and she was so clear, and she was so loving. And she was like, I'm the person I am today. I am strong, I am educated, I'm on a new path, and I can actually help this community now. I can raise our community because I am a strong, powerful young woman. And her father broke down weeping in the house and threw his arms around her and welcomed her back in and said, I will not cut you and I will not cut any of your sisters. And then the whole community celebrated this transformation. So it's not just one girl, it's systemic change. It's change in a community, it's change in tradition, it's change in belief. I want to, in the last years, I also want to say about Agnes that Agnes continues to bring it up to the next level. Like when she ran for parliament, she made ending FGM like a central issue in her campaign, and education of girls and the elevation of girls. And so when we see grassroots activists who move into power structures, because they are people who are not motivated by political fame, they actually carry the issues with them. And they actually fight with a passion and a revolutionary zeal that we don't see, unfortunately, coming from normal politicians. The second person I want to talk about is a woman named Christine Schuler-Describer. And 8 years ago, I met an extraordinary man named Dr. Denis Mukwege, who is an OB/GYN surgeon doctor who works in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was asked to interview him on behalf of the UN, and I didn't want to interview him, to be honest, because we were already working in so many difficult countries. I just couldn't imagine it opening the door to what was happening in the Congo. And I read his resume, and I literally started weeping just reading his resume. And I ended up interviewing him, and I was just so stunned, not only by the nobility and the generosity and the power of this man, but by the absolute atrocities of what he was facing every day in the DRC. And for those of you who don't know this, there's been a war in the Democratic Republic for the last 14 years. It is really on the heels, unfortunately, of the insane colonialism that was actually perpetuated by this country and left so much in shatters and so much and then there have been so many other atrocities and violations that have occurred over the years. But this year began 14 years ago. It's an economic war waged for the minerals of the Congo. Coal, gold, tin, copper, and coltan, which goes into our iPhones and PlayStations and computers. And the mines exist in the villages. So what happens is that the militias invade the villages. They rape and destroy the women's bodies. They force husbands to rape their daughters. They force sons to rape their mothers. They have committed some of the most atrocious crimes I've ever heard on the planet. they destroy the family fractures, the family flees, and then they take over the mines. So that they are using systematic rape as an overt and massive campaign because it's cheap. It's cheaper than Scud missiles. And when I was invited after my interview with Dr. Mukwege, he asked me if they would come to the Congo to support him because he couldn't get the word out, and he was drowning. There were hundreds and hundreds of women at the Pansy Hospital at any given time who he was literally sewing up as fast as the militias were ripping them apart. And all of us are complicit in this war. You know, we may not see it, we may not touch it, but it's in our cell phones. We receive the luxuries and the resources of this war. So when I went to Congo, I have to tell you, I've been to a lot of war zones. I've spent time in Bosnia and in Afghanistan and Haiti post-conflict and Kosovo. But I have to say that the experience of being in the Congo was the most shattering experience I've ever had and hope I ever will have in my life. And when I was there, I met this extraordinary woman named Christine Schuler-Describer, who is my sister and my shiro of the world. And she had been working for many years in the Congo as a human rights activist. And we spent 3 weeks just listening to stories and interviewing women, and women just pouring their lives out in their story. And we were just, at the end of it, the two of us looked at each other and said, it all stops here. Everything stops here. If we allow what's happening in this country to continue, the rest of the world will eventually be destroyed. And we then began to meet with the women of Congo and listen to them and ask them what they wanted. And everything about City of Joy is based on the vision and the creativity and the desire and even the building of the women of Congo, who really were the first construction site ever in the Congo to build a place with men. And what they wanted more than anything was a place where they could heal, where they could learn, where they could become leaders. And we created this place with them called the City of Joy, which is in Bukavu, Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's the most beautiful place I've ever been. It opened 3.5 years ago. There are 90 women every 6 months who go through amazing programs of recovery and healing and sex education and agriculture and self-defense. And when they graduate, the only thing they're asked is they take what they've learned back to their communities and they give what they've learned. And they transform their communities. And we've already graduated 500 girls, and it's wildly beautiful what's happening in the Congo. And Christine is there leading the charge, and it's very difficult in the Congo. There's insecurity that is mind-blowing. There are no roads a lot of the time. There's hardly electricity. There's no water. There's very little infrastructure. But her will and her determination and her beautiful life force and her care for the women has literally carved a path down Essence Road every single day where women can be healed. And I think now we have, that we've bought this amazing land. We bought a 350-hectare farm that the women of Congo will own. There are 200 people working there. We have tilapia. We have hundreds of pigs. We have thousands of tons of rice. We have women who will be learning agriculture and developing their skills. And this will be like the new V-world that we're creating, like a model of what it could look like, even in the midst of an insecure war, if you have the will and you have the love and you have the community and you have the sisterhood to do it. Building a V-Day network over 15 years has deepened solidarity and allowed women across borders to share experiences and methods, birth more artistic expressions, and continued productions of vagina monologues. It's developed deep and lasting friendships, which I want to say are at the center of all movements. If I look at everything that's happened in these years, it's my love connection with Agnes that has fostered that relationship. I look at Monique Wilson, who's in the Philippines, who's worked there for 15 years, and it's friendships that build movements. It's the tending of friendships. It's deepened trust. It's formed unshakable bonds. We have each other's backs. I believe that networks are most solidly and easily formed through common and collective actions. It was the play and productions originally that joined us, and then the fight to end violence against women that grew out of the play, and finding the path to join forces with existing local groups who had been working on these issues for years. So when we reached our 15th year, and I'm just going to talk briefly about 1 Billion Rising, we could see there was much movement forward, but we hadn't actually ended violence against women and girls. And it was clear we needed to escalate our actions, to go the next steps, to re-express the urgency of this issue, and to find a new form of our resistance. And I was at Congo at the time we were going through this deep analysis, and I was I had just recovered from stage 3/4 cancer, and I was bald, and I was skinny, and I was looking weird. The women were really freaked out when they saw me. And what they did is they just started to dance. And women in Congo dance in a way where you understand the power of dance. You understand that dance has the power to re-electrify the consciousness of the world and to bring back the feminine, which is desperate to be born. And when they were dancing, I started thinking, oh my God, what if the 1 billion women all danced on the same day with all the men who loved them? What if we danced up the new energy of the world? And I remember I went back to my team, which is a very small team of like 10 people, and I said, we're going to get 1 billion people to dance. And they were like, that's funny, Eve. And, and I still have this one board member who would call me and say, is it 1 trillion yet? I mean, they were all making fun of me. But in fact, we got millions and millions of people to dance in 200 countries, because when that invitation was put out, it was put out to an already existing network that we had built for 15 years of friendships and connections and people we'd worked in solidarity with. And it was an invitation. Do you want to dance? Do you want to rise and dance? And I cannot tell you how massive the answer was, yes, we want to dance. So each grassroots leader in every country took that invitation and brought it to her community. Each community made it their own and designed it according to their needs, focused on the issues they needed to rise for. So some people were rising to stop sex trafficking. Some people were rising to end the incredible rampant impunity of militarization. Some people were rising to raise the minimum wage for restaurant workers because it escalated sexual harassment. Some made their own songs, poems, dances, and others joined in. I think I just want to say one thing about dance, because I've noticed how oftentimes there's this snarky attitude towards dance, like what does dancing do? And it's almost like the way we talk about women. What do feelings do? What does dancing do? You know, like those lowly things, you know, that are somehow beneath thoughts, you know? And I'm here to say that the biggest problem we have in the world is the disengagement of our heads, our bodies, and our hearts. There are people who live in the head, there are people who live in the body, there are people, but we haven't put it all together, right? When we dance, it actually comes together. It actually comes together. And I just want to say, until I realized that the shutting down of women's bodies, the fleeing from our bodies, was a silent world exodus that was happening over a continuum of time. How many women on this planet, after being raped, after being threatened, after being beaten, have left their bodies because they are the landscape of terror and dread? And so we leave our bodies. We don't inhabit our central life force, our energetic core of our intuition, our vision, our creativity, our sexuality. We're living like off the gas fumes instead of living in the car. And I think what happens when you come back into your body, your creativity is restored. You begin to understand that you're a whole organism and you're actually connected not only to the earth, but to everybody around you. So my answer is to dancing. What does it do? Everything. It allows us to move and re-enter our cells and bloodstream, and it allows us to shake our hips, which have been jammed in terra, containing our sexuality and life force. And I would go through the kind of very basic things that have happened because of dancing. There's a list, and you can go onto the OBR website. But I'll just tell you 3 things that happened so far. You know, the restaurant workers joined forces with 1 Billion Rising to raise the minimum wage, and Cuomo just announced last week that they'll be raising the minimum wage. Ariwana last year, you may not remember, she was a domestic worker who was beaten by her employer in Hong Kong. Last year, coalitions came together, and many groups have been working for Ariana, but they did a rising for her. This year, Ariana danced in the rising and got justice. Her employer was just convicted for 6 years for beating her and burning her. In India, rickshaw drivers, the amazing feminists in India who have incredible vast networks for years and years, trained 100,000 rickshaw drivers as part of 1 Billion Rising in gender sensitivity. And they now, on their rickshaws, have little things that say, my religion is respecting women. Right? In Peru, construction workers were invited into the 1 Billion Rising movement because there was so much development on the streets of Peru. And each site, construction site, was turned into a sexually harassment-free site, with construction workers joining in with solidarity. There are so many outcomes because I believe when people energetically make a decision to come together in solidarity, in vision of ending violence against women, in dance, in movement, in energetic catalytic motion, some energy begins to spill over into everything. Coalitions get formed, people have vision, people begin to get empowered, people can say, I can do this when they couldn't do it before. I mean, there are so many outcomes of that. In finishing, I just want to say, I believe that grassroots leaders and grassroots activists hold the key to igniting real concrete change in systemic violence and oppression. I wish I could tell you that I believe going to the UN is going to do it. I wish I could tell you going to the European Parliament is going to do it. I was there today. For me, and I can only speak for me, I believe in people. I believe in grassroots, radical, revolutionary movements that ignite new energy, new possibility, and where people who have investment in the issue are on the front lines. I also believe that we have to look at systems now. We can't look at people. We have to look at a neo-capitalist system that is impoverishing many. We have to look at racial and incredible racism that is really proliferating in Europe right now, but many places. We have to look at what we are doing to our environment and the desecration of the environment, and how, for example, if you look at Syria, really underneath what's going on in Syria is a water problem because of drought. If you look at so many wars that are being perpetuated on the planet right now, it's because of landlessness or because of water being impure, because people's lands are being taken away by oil refineries and companies to desecrate them. So we can't just look at violence against women as a separate thing. It's part of a larger story that we're all part of. I think that the building of grassroots networks through collective action and resistance is our hope for the evolution of a new paradigm that is horizontal in structure, circular in nature, and fosters leadership that reveals a radical power, not about domination and tyranny, but a power emerging from the experience and expressions of the most marginalized, evoking inclusivity, where all voices matter and where those that have been pushed to the edge take center stage. Until that happens, there will only be a mirage of change, no real change. And I just want to say, this young generation wants everything fast, because you get everything fast on the internet. You know, it's like, oh, go, download, press this, delete. Get a car, get a thing. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen. I've been doing this my whole life. I'm old. I'm here. I've been doing this every day of my life, 12 years a day. Okay? You move forward, you move back. You move forward, you back. You got to commit to the long haul. You can't commit to like clicktivism, where you click a thing and you go, I'm done. This is your life. This is your life. You make a decision. What is your life about? Is it shopping? Is it consuming? Is it massing more? Or is it saying that you are participating in the evolution of a new world vision? And I think it's so crucial, because I look at all of our lives, how long it's taken. How long did it take to get to 1 billion rising? 15 years. 15 years it took us, daily, weaving, working, investigating, having conflicts, women getting angry at each other, repairing the anger, groups being pissed off they didn't get invited, repairing that they didn't get invited. This is the work of movement building. And it requires patience and love and self-reflection and getting out of the way and shutting up and serving and not being about yourself. It requires all that. But I'll tell you, at the end of your days, there is no better life than a life of activism. There is no better life. Do you want to wake up in the morning and assess your goods? Or do you want to wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, Agnes has saved thousands of girls from being cut, who get to have sex, who get to have agency, who get to be educated, who get to have a life. Is there anything better than that? I can't think of anything. So I want to close just with something I want to leave you with. You know, there are 10 principles that govern City of Joy. And I think one of the biggest problems we have right now is we don't have principles anymore. You know, we don't have guiding principles. We don't say, that would be immoral. Why is that person doing that? That is not right. We just go, well, it's always shifting our morality, right? It's just always shifting. Well, it's not that bad. Well, it's pretty bad. But it's not that bad. Well, it's pretty. It's just always moving over. So when women come to City of Joy, they agree to these principles. They have songs that they write of these principles. They have dances they make of these principles. And it's so amazing, because when you live these principles, it's really hard, but it's really amazing. So here they are. I'll leave you with them. 1, tell the truth. And I mean tell the truth. So go deeper when you're thinking about telling the truth. 2, stop waiting to be rescued. Take initiative. 3, know your rights. 4, raise your voice. 5, share what you've learned with everybody you meet. 6, give what you want the most. And I tell you this because at City of Joy, if you say to somebody, I like your scarf, they just hand it to you. So it's an amazing principle. If you are hungry for someone to take care of you, if you are hungry for someone to recognize you, if you are hungry for someone to give you money, give them money. If you are hungry for someone to love you, love them. I tell you, it will heal everything that happens inside you. 7, feel and tell the truth about what you've been through. So many of us walk around pretending we haven't been raped, we haven't been beaten, we haven't gone through pain, we haven't gone through suffering. We act these fakey lives and do this performance stuff where we're like, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. We're not. We're not. It's just bullshit. That's why everyone in Europe is on antidepressants, okay? So part of what we have to start doing is telling the truth about what we've been through and live in the reality, what I call feminist reality, which is really talking about what's going on and bringing that conversation into reality. Use what you've been through as a fuel for revolution. Because what we do is we take our sadness and our victimization and our pain and we do, poor me, I'm so bad. No, that's not the idea. The idea is to take that and let it fuel you so that you can devote your lives to making sure it doesn't happen to other people. The 9th one is practice kindness. And I can't tell you how important I think practicing kindness is. Like, I know when I was younger, if someone had said that to me, I would have puked. But the truth of the matter is, the older I get, the more clear I am that the world changes through kindness. It doesn't change through judgment. It doesn't change through people getting beat up and feeling bad about who they are. It gets changed through kindness. And the last thing is treat your sister's life as if they were your own. And I sometimes think to myself when I sit down on a bus or I sit down in a train or sit down in a movie theater and a woman's next to me, I go, I assume this woman next to me has been beaten, battered, or raped. I just assume it. And then everything changes in the way I treat that woman. Everything. Because I know we're in solidarity and I know we're on this planet. And so when I get mad at people or when I just go, do you want that to happen to you? Do you want someone screaming at you like that? Would you feel good if that were happening to you? And I think everything begins to change. And I just want to say that I think we're in really troubling times. I know most of us can't look at the news. This is the moment for people to rise into your higher selves. Thank you very much.